Imagine losing $40 million because you followed a get-rich-quick tip from a guy who sells slaves and fake dreams. Welcome to 1720, the year England lost its collective mind and invented the world's biggest financial dumpster fire.
If you've spent any time at all in the world of crypto, this story is going to feel strangely familiar. We're talking about 1720s London. You've got fortunes being made in minutes, insane levels of FOMO, a price chart that goes straight to the moon, and, of course, a catastrophic rug pull that bankrupted one of the smartest people who ever lived.
And yeah, that brilliant mind was Sir Isaac Newton. We all know him for, discovering gravity, inventing calculus, the whole shebang. But today, he's not our scientific hero. No, he's actually the main character in a huge financial tragedy, a warning about what happens when pure hype just completely takes over.
So, that's the big question we're tackling here. How did the guy who literally defined the laws of the universe get swept up in a speculative bubble and lose an absolute fortune? Well, the answer is a wild ride through history's first great financial mania. Now, what's so fascinating is that this whole mess didn't start with just pure greed. It actually started with a government trying to fix a problem that sounds super modern, a massive national debt that was just spiraling completely out of control. So, by 1711, Great Britain was basically drowning in debt from a long war. We're talking £9 million. In today's money, that's billions. The government was absolutely desperate for some kind of creative fix. And their solution was the South Sea Company. You can almost think of it like an 18th century DeFi project. The idea was that the company would buy up all this messy government debt. In exchange, the government would give them what looked like a golden ticket, a complete monopoly on all trade with South America. But here's the catch, the fatal flaw, the bug in the code right from the very beginning. The promise was this amazing monopoly. The reality? Well, Spain controlled South America, and Britain was at war with Spain, so the company's entire business model was basically a permit to trade with an enemy who had cannons pointed right at their ships. So for almost 10 years, the company did pretty much zero trading. So its directors, they pivoted. They basically turned the company from a failed shipping business into a full-blown financial engineering machine. And that kicked off one of the most insane speculative bubbles in history. And this chart says it all. The stock price just went vertical from £128 in January all the way up to over 1,000 by August. People weren't buying shares because they believed in the company's business, which, remember, didn't exist. They were just buying because the price kept going up. So how did they do it? It was a classic three-part recipe for hype. First, they promised these unbelievable dividends. We're talking up to 50%, even though they had no revenue. Second, they offered insane leverage, letting people buy stock for just 10% down. And third, they got the ultimate celebrity endorsement. The King of England himself agreed to be the governor of the company. Well, you know what happens next. As the South Sea stock was mooning, a ton of copycats started popping up. It was basically the 1720 version of an ICO craze, or maybe today's meme stocks, with hundreds of these new bubble companies appearing out of nowhere. And some of these were they were completely ridiculous. You had a company to build a perpetual motion machine, another one to import donkeys from Spain, and my absolute favorite, a company raising money for a project so secret and so great, they couldn't even tell you what it was. It just shows you the level of pure madness that had taken over London. Now, the big shots at the South Sea Company started to get a little jealous. All these little meme stocks were sucking up money that they wanted. So they used their political connections to get a law passed called the Bubble Act, which made their competition illegal. But this backfired. Big time. It spooked investors and made them ask, wait a minute, if all these other companies are scams, what about the big one? And that little seed of doubt, well, that's when the crash really begins. In late August, the company directors, the insiders who knew the whole thing was worthless, started quietly selling off all their shares. It was history's first rug pull. And as soon as the word got out that the insiders were dumping on everybody else, absolute panic just took over. There was no buying the dip here because everyone was already leveraged to the hilt. The stock collapsed just as fast as it went up, and it completely wiped people out. Which brings us back to our main character. In the crash, Sir Isaac Newton's total loss was £20,000. That is a catastrophic amount of money for anyone at that time.
To put that in perspective for you, that's like losing about $5 million today. The smartest man alive was financially ruined by a wave of collective madness that he himself admitted he just couldn't calculate.
So, why does a 300-year-old story about ships and government debt still matter? Because the lessons here about human nature and financial markets, well, they're timeless.
So, lesson 1 is for all my crypto people. The South Sea bubble proved that liquidity is a coward. It disappears the second there's trouble. So when you see a project promising impossible returns with no actual product, you're not an investor. You're just playing a game of musical chairs hoping you find a seat before the music stops. And for anyone leading a company, the warning is to watch out for financialization. The South Sea company stopped caring about its actual business and started focusing only on its stock price. When your stock price becomes your main product, you've already lost the game. And finally, there's a huge lesson here about policy and incentives. The British government wasn't trying to create a disaster. They were trying to solve a real problem. But this is a perfect example of how good intentions, when you mix them with really, really bad incentives, can lead to total catastrophe.
Ultimately, that's what this all boils down to. The technology itself is just a detail. It doesn't matter if it's a trading charter on a wooden ship or a token on a blockchain. The human psychology underneath it all, the greed, the fear, the madness of crowds, that stuff never changes.
Which leaves us with one final thought. They say history doesn't repeat, but it sure does rhyme. So when you look around the market today, with all its new tech and grand promises, where do you see the ghost of the South Sea bubble? What's today's great undertaking that nobody's supposed to question?
So next time you see a To the Moon post, remember the South Sea Company. History doesn't repeat, but it definitely memes. Want more weird money stories? Hit that subscribe button before this channel goes to the moon!